You're very welcome to Radio Espial. You're watching episode 64. As you can see there, the topic of our timeline this week, Elizabeth Clarke missing and murdered. Thank you all for joining me, and Brian is coming up shortly, who regularly joins us for these timelines. As always, thank you for the recent subscribers. The channel continues to grow. Please understand, with the amount of comments that we get now every week on features and cases, I can't always reply individually to each of them. I do give a thumbs up when I've read it, so you know the comments, almost 100% of the comments are read. Let's get straight into this episode, and before Brian joins us, again, this is quite a topical and recent case. It's actually been on our radar probably for about 2 years. I think that's when I checked before Christmas, when we entered this into the database. We have been aware that there were going to be developments prior to Christmas on this case, and it was one of those timelines in our community section on the Radio Espial YouTube channel that I intimated that was coming up without naming the case. There have been one or two other timelines that we've been working on, and we've kind of parked them for the moment, and that's why there's been a little bit of a delay us getting to this latest timeline. Elizabeth Clarke. Our case summary. Elizabeth Clarke was officially reported missing in January 2015, though there have been no confirmed sightings of her since November 2013, and they are according to witness statements. Gardaí suspect she was murdered around the time of the last confirmed sighting. We're going to hear more about that, and we'll get into details in the timeline. She reportedly left the home of her ex-boyfriend at Claremont Estate, Navan, County Meath, on a November evening in 2013 around 7 p.m. It could have been later, in the company of two other women. The circumstances of this departure have never been fully made public, and we're going to get into a little bit more of that this evening. What is known is that Elizabeth, Lizzy, to her family and friends, had been estranged from her family for quite some time before. She had 2 young children with her boyfriend Kevin Stanley, and her natural family only became aware of her true disappearance in 2013 following the death of her grandfather Paddy, and repeated efforts to contact her and alert her to his death failed. She only became a formal missing person case in January 2015. This timeline is about filling in some of those disturbing gaps. In February 2025, and if you're clued into this case you will be aware of some of this, her case was upgraded to murder following arrests and forensic searches of several properties in the Navan and general County Meath areas. Now let's get into the case background. Elizabeth Clarke was born on the 30th of August 1989 to Navan in Portrane, a small and quiet seaside village on the east coast of Ireland, and about 3 kilometres from the more well-known seaside area of Donabate, Dublin. At the time, Navan was still herself quite young and living at home with her parents and Elizabeth's grandparents. Years later, Navan would marry Klaus Bayende. To Elizabeth. Elizabeth Lizzy was a bubbly and outgoing child and grew up to love music, singing and having fun with her friends. She was very close to her younger brother Ricky Bayende, but estrangements would later take hold of the family. The family would ultimately move from Portrane, County Dublin, to Bettystown, County Meath. But by her early teenage years, Elizabeth spent much of her time living with her grandmother, Lena Clarke, and some time with her aunt Geraldine, and her uncle Anthony. Now this is Ricky Boyende, the younger brother of Elizabeth. To quote him, "My sister was the most outgoing, bubbly and loving person you could ever meet. She always put everyone else's needs ahead of her own. We were very close, best friends, really. We were like terrible twins. If one of us was in trouble, the other would always step in with support. All we're hoping for is to get some answers after all these years." In reality, some family relationships were becoming fractured, and Elizabeth did spend time in care homes into her later teenage years. Even before her disappearance in 2013, she had not seen her mother physically since 2010, and contact was, even after that, sporadic by phone. Perhaps the moves from Portrane, Bettystown, and then Navan unsettled Elizabeth. We don't exactly know. Families can experience periods of fracture and distance, and this has only compounded a very tragic and complex case. It is what leaves us struggling with the final year or two and the movements and interactions of Elizabeth Clarke in Navan between St. Patrick's Terrace and Claremont Estate, Navan. Our role is to put together the timeline with what we know and not speculate when we try to fill in these obvious gaps. You're looking at an image there. On the top you can see St. Patrick's Terrace. That was one place that Elizabeth lived, and further down at the very bottom you can see that red spot. That is Claremont Estate. And that is ultimately where this story ultimately takes us, this case. By 2013, Elizabeth, then 24 years of age, had two young children, aged 2 and 5. That's approximate now. She lived with her boyfriend, Kevin Stanley, at Claremont Estate. She met him in 2007, but by 2013 had agreed to split with him. The circumstances were not easy. This is a small house at times in the Claremont Estate, hosting at least up to, at times, 5 adults and 2 small children. That was Kevin's parents, Larry and Susan Stanley, and they were not in great health at the time. And there was also Kevin himself, the boyfriend, by then ex-boyfriend, and his brother Tom. They all lived at the property. Now, I want a quick disclaimer before we start getting into the timeline. Yes, our background is limited for this case, but there are reasons why we cannot name certain people in this timeline, and in particular Elizabeth's 2 young children. Then young children, they are now well into their teenage years. We must respect their welfare and privacy. This is a complex case and amounts to more than just a missing person case that was upgraded to murder in February 2025. Unfortunately, we are dealing with parallel investigations into child welfare custody after Elizabeth's disappearance, abuse and neglect before and after disappearance, and some of these matters have already been before the courts. In essence, the murder and circumstances of Elizabeth Clarke is a dual investigation in tangent, and on legal advice we cannot name or go into certain details of these specific cases. We're going to go to Brian now, give his initial early thoughts on this case, and then we are going to get into the timeline. Okay, we're back very shortly with our timeline on the Elizabeth Clarke case. Brian, you're very welcome as always.
Thanks,
Brian.
Dave.
I've gone through the case summary and background, but just before we press on to the timeline, is there anything that you want to touch upon or go through on that timeline?
I think it's good, important there to show the geography of things there, Mick. And yeah, I mean, very tough case, very sad case, and you really have to pay attention. There's so many people involved. really, and quite a complicated family tree there. You have to really pay attention to who's who
Yeah,
there,
yeah,
and
yeah. I mean, like I
to
said,
understand how it all
yeah,
links
yeah.
together. Yeah,
In the you know, I know already in the summary and the background we've mentioned an awful lot of that, and people are going, hang on, who's this, who's that? We're going to do our best to explain that, but like I said, this is we've sometimes done cases, and I'm going to use that word, very traditional family lines, and it's all almost explanatory, but it isn't in this case. There's an awful lot of moving parts and people here involved, and we're going to do our best to try to explain it. But yeah, I mean, as I say, Brian, we went through the case summary. Officially missing in January 2015. Lizzy, bubbly, outgoing girl, and in our case background, born 30th of August 1989, so she was 24 at time of official disappearance in November 2013, although wasn't reported until missing later, but don't worry, we'll get into that. Ricky, I believe Ricky's the younger, but
tougher kids there. I mean,
yeah. So a lot of moving parts in this family.
Yeah.
You can see Ricky there in photograph. That's a screenshot from I think it was the 2019 crime call appeal. Bettystown was where the grandparents were originally from and living. That's Paddy and Lena, who brought up for much of the time Elizabeth. Brian, that map that you just mentioned there, at the very top, I think I already mentioned this, St. Patrick's Terrace. That was one early abode, I think rental abode, where they were living, and you can see it's not actually that far from the very bottom. That red circle is actually where much of what we're going to be talking about that happens in this case, particularly recently, Claremont Estate is located. So you can see not a great distance at all. I think, what is it, if I can read that, that's 13 minutes, and I think that, yeah, 13 minute walk, and it's not far at all. Again, I'm not going to repeat it. We've gone through the disclaimer on the background. There is limited details, and there are issues within this case, and we're going to only briefly mention them in the timeline. We cannot go into them for legal reasons, for ongoing previous court cases, current ongoing cases, and anything subsequent that might happen. So we're not, if you think we're forgetting something, it's for a very deliberate reason. We're not forgetting it. It's because we legally cannot go into it. Brian, yeah, we'll press straight onto the timeline. I think that's the best thing to do.
All right, Mick.
Okay, so 2009 to 2010. Elizabeth moved to Slane initially, I think for a very brief time, when she was 17, and sometime later moved to a house in Navan. I believe that was the St. Patrick's Terrace house that was rented. Nolan and a young son, Ricky, that's the mother, and the younger son of the younger brother of Elizabeth, Nolan, and her young son went to stay for a visit at once time, but they lost contact with Elizabeth. And this is going to be a common theme in this timeline. She said, Nolan, she didn't want to see us anymore. It was not an easy thing to hear. Nolan and other members of the family continued to telephone her, but she would often hang up. So we can already see there's an awful lot of estrangement already in 2009 and 2010. Now, sometime, I believe this was later in 2010, Elizabeth Clarke moves in permanently with Kevin Stanley at Claremont Estate, Navan. That's where his family lived. Okay, so the boyfriend's family, the Stanley family, lived in Claremont Estate, Navan. 2012, 2013. By 2012, Elizabeth and Kevin had long established a home at Claremont Estate, Navan, with their 2 young children. Geraldine and Nigel O'Leaf, who were relations, last remember seeing and hearing from Elizabeth in October 2012. That was their recollection. We're going to hear something more in the outtake video piece coming up shortly. So remember, that would have been the Halloween time, 2012. Now, neighbours also verified to Gardaí that they witnessed Elizabeth with her 2 young children knocking on doors in the Claremont Estate, as you would around the Halloween time with 2 young children, you know, dressed up for the Halloween parties and collecting. Things began to get murky at this time. It has been constantly stated that Elizabeth Clarke went missing on November 2013, following year. So that's like almost 2 Halloweens. And therein is the problem. The Elizabeth Clarke side of the family can't establish little beyond Halloween the previous year, 2012. Her younger brother Ricky remembers talking to her around Halloween 2012. We're going to take this insert, and there is going to be a disclaimer coming up about this insert, and we'll go into that more in a second. Jeez, there's an awful lot of fucking disclaimers in this, Brian. We really have to scare very, very careful waters here. Okay, so we're going to take a look at that insert. I'm going to read on a little bit, and then I'm going to go back to Brian. Okay, so let's take a listen to that insert around the Halloween reference and the discrepancy with dates. Was it really 2012 that we last seen or heard from Elizabeth, or are we wrong? Was it maybe, was it October, November 2013? This is what we're getting into. Let's take a listen to it.
The last time on the 2012 or 2013?
I think the other family members, my wife Geraldine, or Jennifer, would have spoken to her Halloween 2012.
Okay, so we need to clear this up. Now, the other family where Elizabeth Clarke was living with a boyfriend, they last seen it in November 2013. So we got 2 sides of the family. Yeah, this is your side.
Yes.
Yeah, so this is Elizabeth Clarke's natural side of the family. When she was living with the boyfriend and the mother and all the other people in where she was living in Navan. Now, it was 2013, they say, that they last seen her, and the last time they seen her was around 2013. They were unsure of, in the November time, she left in the evening, the mother said, but they were unsure of what time of the evening it was. They couldn't remember whether it was 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. So it was a little bit vague.
So in November 2013, and I need to stress here that the following account of what happens to Elizabeth Clarke is the basis of statements provided to An Garda Síochána and media interviews provided by the Stanley family: Kevin, Larry, Susan and Tom. What happened here in November 2013 may be entirely true, and that is their true recollection. The Stanley family could not provide any specific date, day or week, or exactly what precise time of the evening it was Elizabeth leaving the house. In fact, their statements do actually conflict each other. Their account is that sometime, it could have been 7 p.m, but it probably wasn't any later than 11 p.m, during an evening of November 2013, 3 family members state they were present in the Claremont home, but nobody really seems to be sure of the day of the week or the time in the evening when these events occur. Now remember, it's November, it's late evening, Halloween, it's come and gone, it's dark. Apparently this is some vague time, maybe in early to mid-November. The couple, Kevin and Elizabeth, have already decided to split at this point, but Elizabeth is still in the Stanley family home, the boyfriend's home. The following version of events are related to the Stanley family, the adults and the people she was staying with every day. We do not know what version, if the same, the Stanley family provided to An Garda Síochána in witness statements. I'm going to make some points following this next video segment, which is kind of a continuation from what you've just seen. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll go back to Brian.
She went missing in Navan in 2012. The family last seen her. In 2013, she was living with a boyfriend, the father, the mother-in-law, and all the sons in the house. She had 2 young children, and one evening, the mother-in-law said is that she left the house with a bag with money in, and she had a yellow top on, hoodie top. She had no coat. You can imagine it would have been cold, freezing, or in the middle of November, and it also would have been dark. Yeah. Now, the father-in-law is unsure exactly when the actual left, whether it was in the middle of November, whether it was at the beginning. He was unsure. That might be just a coincidence, you know, it might be just he couldn't remember what part of the month was. Now, what was really disturbing to me, when I was speaking to the mother-in-law, is that there was a guy standing behind the door, which was one of the brothers, yeah? And he was trying to close the door, and I was trying to shout up to I was trying to shout up, and I was asking the mother, could I speak to the boyfriend, because he was with Elizabeth at the time, and he had 2 young children to her. Now, he still lives with them 2 young children, but I just wanted to refresh his memory as if he could give us any insight or any information that he may have forgot that may give us a better lead to where Elizabeth is to this day. But he refused. The mother and the father shielded them and would not let them talk to me at all. But what was disturbing while I was there talking to the mother is that I was getting the door pushed on me by a gentleman, which was one of the brothers that lived in the house. And as I was talking, I was shouting to him. They shouted his name, one of the brothers. His name was Tom, to be honest with you. And Tom was pushing the door as if he wanted to close it over. Now, I asked Tom, where was he on the night that Elizabeth Clarke went missing? He didn't answer me. His mother jumped in quickly and said, he was in his friends, he was in his friends, he was in his friends. And then there was some type of discussion going on, like whispering between Tom, the father, the mother, which I found a little bit uneasy, because if you can imagine, Elizabeth that night is obviously gone missing. It's a big memory, you would know. Basically, she's walked out the door, the police have been to investigate where she's gone. You would clearly know where you was on the night that Elizabeth went missing. Now, he said, well, he didn't say, sorry, his mother said, is that he went to a friend's place and he was out with his friends, yeah? Now, when I asked, I said, Larry butted in and he shouted, he was in his friends, he was in his friends. So they made a big commotion about that this man, this big man, was in his friends. So I shouted to Tom, I said, Tom, what friends was you in? And then panic all set loose then. The mother turned around and said, clearly, is that he doesn't know what friends he was in. He doesn't know what friends he was in. And most of the friends that have left Navan because of Elizabeth going missing. But what would that have to do with the guy hiding behind the door, which was one of the brothers? Why can't he remember? Or is it just a coincidence? Is there something that we're missing? Or is there something that is wrong? It just doesn't add up. And also as well, if it was my girlfriend that went missing and she left and I was upstairs and she was leaving for the last time, I'd be thinking, why haven't I got a bag of clothes with me? Why isn't she taking clothes? If I'm seeing her and I've got 2 young children, Why hasn't Kevin run down the stairs, the boyfriend, and said, okay, babe, where are you going? Are you going to be all right? Are you going to be travelling somewhere? Is there a destination? Are you going back to your family? Are you going, are you going off somewhere? It just doesn't add up at all. I mean, you've got a young girl, she's got 2 babies, and you've got a family that are letting it go. We know that there's been arguments, and we know that there's been fights. There's just big, huge inconsistencies, and I really feel uncomfortable that they have to be questioned again over this. I mean, they might be purely innocent, but it doesn't fit in. I don't know whether the brothers have actually been questioned over this, but there's certainly big, huge inconsistencies, which I don't claim to be anyone, but anyone with any normal common knowledge would be asking these questions. I mean, why is the mother saying is that there was 2 young ladies she left with, and these 2 young ladies, Elizabeth left with 2 young ladies who were standing on the bottom of the gate. When she left, they were waiting for her. Apparently, I asked her twice, I said, are you sure Elizabeth Clarke has left with you 2 ladies? Then I asked her clearly, what did the people look like? She said one was dark skinned. So anyone that is in Navan now, thinking back, you're talking about Elizabeth.
Okay, so you can see this is something's not making sense here. And off Elizabeth goes into the darkness of the night with these 2 mysterious women, walking off down the road, meeting them at the gate, no car in sight, 2 kids, her kids, in the Stanley family home, but Elizabeth is off to disappear and never return. She is described as being 5 foot 3 inches in height, approximately 7 stone in weight, with brown hair and brown eyes. And again, detail. She was last seen wearing a yellow hooded top and blue jeans.
Yeah. But 2 women are like, it's very generic, like one dark, one fair.
One dark one, yeah. And yet we have a description. We have a description of what Elizabeth was wearing. Yeah. Such a significant event, and yet not one member of that household, the Stanley household, can tell us what date it was, what day of the week it was, and any real detail on the circumstances around it.
Because oftentimes things like that, you'd remember what was on TV, or you'd remember what was going on at the time. But if something significant happens like that,
and I mean, you can link it. You can link it because you've got a date there. You've got Halloween, October the 31st. So you can say it was a few days after Halloween. No, hang on, no, it must have been at least 2 or 3 weeks after Halloween.
Yeah.
You can go, well, hang on, none of us in the house were going to work that day, so it must have been on the weekend. So you can kind of just by logic start to narrow down what day it was. I remember the following morning taking the bins out. We always took the bins out on a Monday, or we always took them out on a Friday. You can, but nothing from the Sunday to narrow this down. It's all very vague, and they can present quite precise details.
What about these 2 women? Like who?
Two women. One dark skinned, one white girl. That really helps. And then but there was no car there. No car. Definitely, there was no car there. Tom. Kevin's brother. He was with friends. What friends? He's not sure. He doesn't know. I mean, this is just cobbled together crap, that is just not making any sense for such a significant event of a woman supposedly saying, that's it now, Stanley family, thanks very much for looking after me and looking out for me, I'm heading off here, you'll never see me again, good luck now.
Hang on a second,
Elizabeth, don't you want to take a suitcase clothes, jeez, you know, look after
Kids,
yourself,
what
girl.
about the 2 kids, like?
Oh yeah, what are we meant to do with the kids?
Yeah.
If this event happened, those conversations would have happened. Hang on a
Yeah.
where are you fucking going, girl? You've got 2 kids here. What are we going to do with them? You know, details would have been sorted out.
Yeah.
None of that. No detail. They are the kind of things that, by Christ, you would have remembered. What do you remember when Lizzy left the house? You would have remembered those. You would have known exactly the minute, the hour, and the day, and the circumstances. But these 4 or 5 clowns can string a single cohesive statement together that matches up and ties together. Now we're on to another disclaimer. I promise you this is the last one. We've touched on this before, and the video segments that you saw are from a guy called, he's a British investigative psychic journalist reporter, and you know where we are when we go down these avenues. We've always stated on Radio Espial that we are very sceptical when family members of a missing loved one call on the assistance of psychics. It has the potential to provide false hope without scientific or legal witness evidence. However, in this case, we did solely using the one-on-one evidence gathering and interviews conducted by Joe. There are other video segments, but frankly we are not including them because they just get far too much into the realms of psychic readings and highly speculative deductions. All the hand on the nose and wait a second, I'm seeing something here, and we have not included those segments. We drew a line in the work that Joe did up until it was what it was. It was doorstepping, and in fairness, he had the guts to do it and ask questions of the family. Didn't get the greatest of answers, but that was as far as we were prepared to go in some of the videos that we've had access to. Brian, do you want to say any more on that before I go?
At least they got their chance to give their side of it anyway.
Exactly, and that's more than we've gotten. Obviously, they have done public interviews with newspapers, but beyond that, they haven't been able to fully express their side of the story.
Yeah. So that's
okay.
That's where at least you got that out there anyway.
And that was why I felt it was important to include, because it's the first sense of closeness to the case that we get. So there's an immediate discrepancy here with the timing and statements provided to Gardaí Síochána and what appears to have been publicly reported to the media. Some family members of the associated Clarke family say that Elizabeth was last seen and in contact with them as far back as Halloween 2012, and I think that was Ricky who mentioned that, and I think even Nigel, and I believe, and I want to be careful here, a member of the Clarke family, it might be Lisa, I'm not certain, also said that's the last time that we remember. So there's
Geraldine's husband.
Nigel is Geraldine O'Gleef's husband. So this conflicts the evidence gathered by Gardaí and other family members and neighbours that Elizabeth was alive and active at the Halloween celebrations at Claremont Estate in 2013, which is the month supposedly that she disappears, calling on doors with her 2 children. So the Stanley family reported she left their home in November 2013 in the company of these 2 generic, as Brian would say rightly, women, one dark skinned, one white. Yeah, hello, who are we looking for? Elizabeth, according to the Stanley family accounts, did not enter a vehicle that they saw, so they know with that. No vehicle parked outside. They just simply walked off together. 2 women at the waiting for at the gate. So off out the house that evening for good and did not return. She didn't leave with a bag or clothing. I think there's a reference made to a bag with money. Almost like it's some sort of swag bag where she was carrying out, $10 million in it. I think the reference, I think in fairness, is a small clutch bag, a handbag that she put money in for herself. She didn't take a passport which would seem strange. And there was no activity on her personal bank account from this point on. Brian, some of these details on that departure left me wondering. The Stanley account is, that was the last we've seen of her. She left home. She was leaving home. That was it. Kevin and her had split up. End of. I'm getting the impression that even if these two generic women at the garden gate is true, she wasn't leaving home. She was going out for the night. She's going out for the night.
Yeah. Or
that's the impression I get. She's bored. I want to get out of this house. It's stressed out. Whatever. That's what strikes me about this occasion. But look, hey everybody, you make up your own minds on what all we can do is what we present. Yeah.
Like, even if you were splitting up or whatever, like it's still a case of she was still living in the house. So like you'd be going, where the hell is she at 12 or 1 or 2? If she was going out for a drink, fair enough. If they were going out for a drink, or if they were if there was some other social thing, or they were you'd expect, geez, she never came home at whatever time.
Yeah, you'd still expect where are you going, what time will you be back? Geez, she's not back, and suddenly that sticks in your mind as a family. However well and not well you're getting on.
Yeah, but the
together.
Mystery, the two women would have been another. Well, first of all, there's the kids. Like, you'd be going, the kids, Mr. Mum, where's she? Like?
Where's Mammy?
Where's the Mammy? Like, and then the other thing is, like, you'd expect you to be going, geez, those two women, who the hell were they? Like,
yeah.
I mean, were they two friends? Were they from school? Were they from a job she worked in, or did she get to know them? Where like?
Yeah, if they're real,
who the hell were they? And if they're real, like, so
if they're real,
they? And you'd be tracking them down and going, we need to find those two women, like,
Yeah, like she didn't just wander down the garden gate and go, oh, hello, two strangers, how are yous? Oh, let's go somewhere together. I know. If they exist, she clearly had to know them.
Yeah.
If she knew them, they were either associated with her or they were actually friends. And if they were friends, why the hell have we not been able to track them down and eliminate them?
Did they go to one of their houses?
Yeah.
If this did happen, did they go to one of their houses? Did they go to a pub? Did they go to a cafe? Did they go shopping? Did they go, what was it like? I mean, where were they expected to go off to, like,
Yeah.
And did she not say, I'll be back later on? Or
and
did she say, I'll be back at
7 o'clock, apparently, or maybe it might have been 11 o'clock on a cold November evening. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken from the reports, and these might be even Gardaí, she wasn't wearing a heavy coat. It's pretty fucking cold in November in Ireland.
Yeah.
Okay, so October 2014 to January 2015. So, estranged from family and a very significant passing of time, Elizabeth's grandfather, Paddy Clarke, passes away on October the 3rd, 2014. And the family desperately try to re-establish contact with Elizabeth and the Stanley family to alert her, Elizabeth, to his passing, and if she wished to attend the funeral. Now, bear in mind, Elizabeth Clarke spent several years, very formative early years, being raised by the Clarke grandparents, Lena and Paddy, in Bettystown, County Meath. So that would have been a very significant point in her life. And pointedly, here's a picture. This is Lena and Paddy, who's now deceased. Lena, thank God, is still with us, and you're actually going to see her on some video insert coming up. And that's Elizabeth, bubbly, bold, outgoing, in the centre. January 2015. The Clarke and wider family only now learn that Elizabeth has been gone, missing, since November 2013. At no stage did the Stanley family ever contact Gardaí or register a missing person case and raise concern when Elizabeth left the Claremont Estate and never returned post November 2013. Remember, it's January 2015 now. The Clarke family file a missing person report with Gardaí in Navan. Now, throughout 2015, over the following days and weeks and months, Gardaí ramp up their search for Elizabeth Clarke in the local vicinity of Navan, the local waterways, and the case becomes national and public media appeals are commenced. Gardaí carried out extensive inquiries, including house-to-house inquiries in the area. Remember the Halloween and Elizabeth with the 2 kids going door to door. Canal and river searches assisted by the Gardaí water unit and Meath River Rescue, but Elizabeth cannot be found. Her 2 young children remain in the care of the Stanley family for that period of time in Claremont, Navan. 2016. Larry Stanley, father of Elizabeth's ex-boyfriend Kevin Stanley, is recorded on video, the father, on video tearing down missing person photos in the local Navan area. Ultimately, he admits publicly through news interviews to doing this out of frustration and intense community and media pressure on his family. That might have also happened through social media and been somewhat shamed on social media. He regrets his actions, but states that the allegations in the community against his son, Kevin, him and the family have absolutely no foundation. To quote, "I do regret it, but when you're putting up with this all the time, you're going to get pissed off. I'm in pain 24/7. My wife is in pain 24/7. Eventually it's going to hit. I've never have it in me to hurt anybody. I lost it and got taken after people were sitting in the estate for days. We have nothing to hide. We're trying to get on with our daily lives. 22 Garda came into our house last January 2015. That's a shock and a half. They checked under the floorboards for a body and everything. In this estate, if I wanted to murder you now..." Hang on, slow down, Larry. Who mentioned murder? You know, nobody mentioned murder at that stage. Elizabeth's just been reported missing. "You know, I'd never get away with it. Those eyes are on us all the time here. I cannot go out the back door without someone looking out a window at me. How would you do anything? They're blaming our family for doing something. We would never do anything to her. All we ever tried to do was help her." So that's Larry Stanley referring to the incidents and circumstances between 2015 and 2016. And at that time, he also revealed that he was ill, suffering from leukemia, and his wife was also ill. I believe she was actually later quite disabled and was in a wheelchair. That's our Larry there, walking away. You can see the crutch he's set aside. No problem ripping down the poster, put the crutch down. 2016, 2018. Very soon into the investigation, Gardaí have long established persons of interest. Much of this surrounds the last 2 places Elizabeth lived in Navan. So that would have been the terrace, the St. Patrick's Terrace, and then the Claremont later. Her children are still living with their father, but the Clarke family instigate custody proceedings. A fractious and long period follows between the Stanley and Clarke families and the courts. It is the role of It is the role of the family courts to decide where Elizabeth's children are best placed for their health and their welfare. There are many street and public confrontations between both families, and sadly that was painfully played out on social media. Brian, before we go into this video insert, I think it's a little bit more the last segment of the Joe Power stuff. Do you want to say any more?
Yeah, I think it's very sad that in the middle of all this stuff, that poor girl is missing and presumed dead. And it's I know it was only upgraded to murder this month, but back then she hadn't been there for 3 years at this stage. Now up to 5 years. There's no sign of her. There's no the kids are missing their mother, and this stuff is all. I know Clarke were trying to instigate custody proceedings on this. There was no question about where she was in terms of placing the kid. Well, explicitly, but with all this going on, she's missing, and you'd expect people should be more collaborating. I understand the frustration for Clarke, for Larry Stanley there, if there were reporters and sitting on his doorstep and Gardaí and all that.
Yeah.
But I think tearing, and in fairness, he did say he regretted it, but tearing down the missing posters, like, that wasn't
what was that? What was that going to achieve?
Yeah, exactly. And he should, you should be thinking, Jesus, we got to find Lizzy. Like, that's what I think. Yeah, all of them should have been thinking. We got to find Lizzy. Where the hell is she? I'm not hearing that from the. I'm not hearing that there. That's what
we'll get more into that, I think, when we touch on our conclusions. As to what was really going on with the Stanley family household. Whatever the Clarkes were trying to do as best they could, and saying, look, we didn't even realise until, so much time had passed for whatever reasons. But what on earth with the Stanley family? It was just like, she walked out the door.
I know.
She's not with our Kevin now. Fuck all to do with us now. Good luck now. See you, love.
But you've got 2 kids there, so it should be like, you should be going, where the hell is Lizzy? Yeah. Nobody said that, like,
Yeah.
And
so
that's it. Sure.
Okay, let's take that video insert, and then it's time to move on, and we're shortly going to wrap up and get into the more recent events. So let's take a look at that.
There's nothing of her. Nothing. Nobody has seen her. She's like just vanished into thin air, which is impossible. It's heartbreaking at this stage. And Elizabeth wouldn't have walked out on her 2 children at all. She loved her children. There's no way she would have walked out on them.
And she wouldn't have walked away from her family.
We think she is murdered.
We think she's been murdered or hurt.
If she was, she would have contacted
us. She would have contacted us. She would have got in touch with the Gardaí.
Okay, so September 2019, I referred it earlier, I think, when we were talking about some of the quotes from Ricky that came out of that RTE Crime Call broadcast, an appeal for more information on the case. That was September 2019. Now, more recent events. Between 2020 and 2025, at least 4 persons, I believe there might have been 5 at the time, but somebody I'm not going to go into it, left. Persons of interest have been long established by the direct Gardaí investigation team, and in more recent years, like the last 2023-24, the GSCR review unit over several years. That's the Garda Serious Crime Review Unit. All of these people have been interviewed multiple times, arrested more than once, and continue to protest their innocence into the disappearance and murder of Elizabeth Clarke. She walked out the door, and that was that for them. And those 4 people of interest, those in the street know this, and you already know who they are. So there's no privacy issue here. We know they are Kevin Stanley, the ex-boyfriend, Larry Stanley, father of Kevin, Tom Stanley, Kevin's brother, and Susan Stanley, wife of Larry Stanley. My understanding is there was one other adult living there, a 5th adult, and I'm not going to name them because I have reasons to believe they may not in any way be involved with this. Not that I'm suggesting these people, the Stanley family, are involved, but they have an awful lot of questions to answer, and from very early days the Gardaí had eyes on them. It wasn't just the Navan community that had eyes on them. January, February 2025. Now, specifically on January the 20th, 3 males are arrested and searches conducted of properties in the Navan area. The 3 men are released without charge. Oh no, you're talking about, that only happened last week or the week before. No, actually, there were arrests, but the initial arrests weren't talked about much. In fact, I actually only came across, Brian, you remind me on this, I only came across the Boyne News, who actually covered this, and that was again comparing Gardaí have confirmed to Boyne News, arrests, searches, January the 20th. Outside of that, there were few other news media reporting on this in January the 20th. So don't don't confuse this with the events in the last week or 2. Now, in January and February, more arrests and searches of property are conducted in the Navan area. The Elizabeth Clarke case is upgraded from a missing person to a murder case. That was the 2nd round of arrests and searches.
Yeah, and the search only finished a couple of
days
ago.
Literally. The property of particular interest is the Claremont Estate, the home of the former home, I should state, of the Stanley family, because they weren't living there at this stage when the second round of searches occurred. On the night of a vigil and community gathering, this is the particular thing I really don't like about these cases that we cover, Brian. A crowd in Navan confront two of the suspects. They flee into a local chipper takeaway and out to the rear of the property and require Garda assistance to return home. You've got 20 seconds is all I'm allowing on this of that initial vigil, and I'm sharing it through the nature of conflict back and forward that has happened across social media, and to give you a sense of the atmosphere in Navan on this case. So let's take a look at that.
Hey, come on, fucking child abuse. What does a fucking take a fucking talking about? What do we want? Justice for Lizzy! What do we want? Now! What do we want? Justice for Lizzy! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice for Lizzy! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Now! 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 Now!
Brian, yeah, unseemly scenes. Everybody has a right to protest, to bring forward a case, highlight it, that more needs to be done. But this is where you literally start. I don't believe for a moment those two members of the Stanley family just stumbled into this. They were sought out. Members of that crowd went looking for them. That's not acceptable.
No, you got to be careful. Even, I mean, yeah, you can't be, and like there's two things that fails to achieve it. Well, obviously it's people want to get a result, but like the two things it can fail with then is, you know, if you go down this road, you might never find out what happened to Lizzy, number one. Number two, you can totally compromise the case.
You will potentially seriously damage the case, and perhaps that's one of the arguments that Larry Stanley was trying to make. That, look, I've had these people camped on my doorstep.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm ever actually charged with anything, he's got serious grounds of compromise to say, hang on, I'm not getting a fair trial here. There's not a single person in this country is going to give me an unbiased opinion and judge me, judge my son, my two sons, judge my wife, or judge anybody connected with this family as to what happens.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
The long and the short of it is, the most important person in all of this is Lizzy. Like,
is Elizabeth.
So Elizabeth. So you got to find out how you ultimately want to find out what happened to her, like, you know, and get answers for her kids, and you know, people who cared about her, like, so it's that's important. So you got to keep, you know, think people should be thinking that way. You know, if
you know something and you honestly believe that somebody in that community is directly responsible, and you absolutely are certain of it, don't go and do stupid fucking things. Go to the Gardaí and give that information.
Not
take it up with the Gardaí and give that information.
Sit in on the Garda station if you want.
Go and protest. Go and protest and say, you take my statement. I have important information. I know more about this case.
The Gardaí technically work for you. Go into the Garda station, sit it out in there, and say, you know, do it that way, like, because it's like I said, finding Elizabeth is the main thing.
But chasing people into chippers is not going to bring Lizzy back or answer questions.
No.
Friday the 7th of February. This is more what you've been hearing on the news, so not what happened in January the 20th. On Friday the 7th of February 2025, Gardaí spent much of Friday, I think it was the late night of Thursday into the early hours of Friday. They usually do these searches at 6-7 a.m. In the morning. They claimed they had to were clearing a mountain of waste and material from inside a house at Claremont Estate in order to begin a search for the remains of Elizabeth and any evidence that may explain the events that led to her disappearance and murder. So they've now declared the case a murder case. The house in Navan, County Meath, is also at the heart of a separate investigation into the abuse and neglect of children and a vulnerable adult. We know the vulnerable adult that's mentioned in that case, and it's not who you're thinking of. One of the men linked to the abuse investigation is also associated with the investigation into the 12-year-old disappearance of Elizabeth Clarke. This is the area. You're going to hear a news piece now about the initial Friday the 7th of February searches. We are now in no man's land. These are the areas we cannot get into. We can only mention that there is another serious separate investigation, and our understanding is this is also partially what led to the events of Friday the 17th, the further searches, the further arrests, that there's more going on in this case and there are dual investigations going on. So let's take a look at that quick news piece.
Good evening and welcome to Friday's 6-1.
The headlines this evening. Missing for 12 years, Gardaí say the disappearance of Elizabeth Clarke is now a murder investigation. Gardaí have confirmed they have upgraded their investigation into the disappearance of a woman 12 years ago to a murder investigation. Elizabeth Clarke, a 24-year-old mother of two, had lived in Navan in County Meath and has not been seen since November 2013. Let's cross over now to our North East correspondent Mark O'Driscoll, who joins us from Navan Garda Station. Mark, what's the latest this evening?
Yes, Sharon. Well, in the past few moments, we've learned that this search operation at a property in County Meath has been stood down for the night, and it will resume again at first light in the morning. Now, that search operation was launched today. We understand that it's going to be an extensive search of a property in the county, that excavation work is likely to take place, and that the search is going to take a number of days to be completed. That search is being carried out by Gardaí attached to the Meath Serious Crime Hub that are based here at Navan Garda Station, as well as the Meath Divisional Search Unit and the Garda National Technical Bureau. However, Gardaí also saying that other state expertise in the form of a forensic archaeologist are available to them should they be required. Now, just to give you the background here, Sharon, Elizabeth Clarke lived in both Portrane in North County Dublin and also in Bettystown in County Meath with her family for a period of time, but she was living here in Navan when she went missing in 2013, and she was 24 years of age. However, she was officially reported missing by her family just over a year later in January of 2015, and an extensive missing persons case was launched. Gardaí carried out door-to-door inquiries, land searches were carried out, but also searches of rivers and canals. The Garda Water Unit were involved, as were the Meath River Rescue. However, there have been no sightings of Elizabeth Clarke in the past 10 years, and Gardaí taking the decision today to upgrade that missing persons case to one of murder and also to renew their appeal for information.
So February the 10th, this is after the weekend now. Gardaí announced that their forensic searches had concluded at the former home of the Stanley family, and that while evidence was gathered, they would not be making any further comments pending full and forensic examination. Over a 4-day period of searching, Gardaí found a vacated property. Remember, I told you the Stanley family were not living there at this period of time, in very poor state, with a significant accumulation of rubbish which had to be assessed and examined for case value. I'm sure probably a lot of it wasn't even relevant to the case, maybe some of it was, but it's delving into what might be there left and was relevant. There was also further searches of the surrounding areas, the area around Claremont Estate, and some areas slightly further afield. And again, I'm not going into it likewise, which is why the Gardaí said they are not going into it for operational reasons.
Standard Garda statement, like
yeah, and standard statement from Radio Espial as well when we can't talk about a certain subject. The Stanley family had long left the house, and search warrants were already in process since 2024. Hello. For more intrusive forensic searches using diggers and the services of a forensic archaeologist. As in January, following the searches, the arrested suspects are released without charge. That's more normal than you might think.
Fresh searches in a case that's more than a decade old. A home in Navan was blocked off by Gardaí investigating the disappearance of Elizabeth Clarke as they carried out searches inside it with the help of the Garda Technical Bureau. They could be seen removing a number of items from the house using wheelbarrows. They also removed a window pane. It marks a huge development as Gardaí confirmed the missing persons case has now been upgraded to a murder probe. The 24-year-old mother of two was last spotted in 2013 but was officially reported missing by her family in 2015. Gardaí say they've carried out extensive investigations since then, but Elizabeth has never been found. The community in Navan is hoping today's developments will bring answers to her family.
Gardaí sources disclosed to Radio Espial that there are in fact two separate but parallel investigations ongoing into the circumstances around the murder of Elizabeth Clarke, and these led to the need to escalate the case of Elizabeth Clarke to murder in order to release resources on more thorough and intrusive forensic searches that may produce evidence of Elizabeth and or evidence that may need to be used in any further charges on a DPP file. TUSLA, the Irish Child and Family Agency, are also working directly with Gardaí, and that is in relation to the other matter. One investigation concerns the specific case of the events leading to Elizabeth's murder and several persons of interest who are now suspects, on a separate investigation into the abuse and well-being of two children and one adult between 2010 and 2022. Both children were removed by Child Social Services previous to 2025. These investigations and matters continue to be ongoing and subject to future charges being brought. Brian, before we get into the case conclusions and analysis.
Very sad.
This is a mess. This is a complex mess now.
Yeah. Very, very sad. Yeah.
Okay, our case conclusions and analysis. There's no mincing of words here. This remains a very active and volatile case with two distinct, separate investigation cases. Again, there are aspects of this case we cannot explore for legal reasons. It is what it is, and our role is to highlight cases and not in any way damage or hinder future charges. Let us focus on the circumstances of Elizabeth Clarke's disappearance and murder case and what can be confirmed. Elizabeth's disappearance was reported by her immediate family, the Clarke family, in January 2015. However, her disappearance occurred at the latest in November 2013, post-Halloween, although we do have family reports that Elizabeth's disappearance and some of their last contacts may actually have occurred before that, long before that. We can only go on the witness statements provided by the Stanley family where Elizabeth was residing. Their account of a November evening in 2013 remains significantly flawed, with witness inconsistencies and claimed witnesses who have never come forward, or generic two women outside the Claremont residence. Kevin Stanley and Elizabeth had already agreed to part ways and end the relationship. Presumably, she remained living there due to the 2 young children they shared together, and until she found somewhere else to live. You recall Larry's quote saying, look, we've nothing to do with this, absolutely no connection, whatever happened, Elizabeth. She went, she left of her own accord, all we did was the best we could do for that girl. When she left, she did not take the children with her, nor did she take any clothing or a passport. There was no activity on her bank account following her disappearance. I haven't mentioned it, there was also no activity on her social media
or
accounts.
Even an overcoat, a proper overcoat.
Or a proper overcoat in fucking November. Like, hello. This does not seem to fit with somebody planning a permanent departure. Kevin Stanley has stated that he was upstairs in the house when she left and did not physically see her leave. It's the father of her kids. Her departure down the garden drive to the street where these 2 women, supposedly at the garden gate, were waiting, only seems to have been witnessed by Susan Stanley at the front door. So what exactly was Susan doing at the front door? Despite the best efforts of the Clarke family and Garda appeals over the years, these 2 women have never come forward to be identified and give statements. If these 2 women did exist, as reported by the Stanley family, then it would make sense that Elizabeth must have known them to some degree, at least acquaintances or friends. Elizabeth's friends would have been screened and spoken to by Gardaí. Yet, no one can identify or explain exactly who these 2 women were. It seems remarkable that for such an event, no member of the Stanley family can provide a specific date or day when Elizabeth left. However, they were able to provide descriptions, as generic as they were, of these 2 women that she was presumably gone off with, and that no vehicle was observed outside the house that Elizabeth might have got into, including describing what she was wearing. So, this is a woman who leaves the house, no coat on, no passport, no clothing. Doesn't sound like a woman who's about to disappear on her own circumstances. If anything, you'd have crept down the stairs and slipped out the door nice and quietly, saying not a word. But hey, Susan witnesses these 2 women, the garden gate, this meeting of 3 people disappearing off. Critically, Kevin Stanley continued to collect state benefits due to Elizabeth for more than a year, 2013. The Stanley family, with Elizabeth's 2 young children in their care, claimed there was no contact from her after she left the house and disappeared. Yet
he must have had her ID sorted, if he was collecting the.
We had another case on it. I can't remember. You either have to have the card, or I know they used to do these slips of paper where you had to sign. You signed as a witness, and that person had to bring in the slip of paper. Yeah. But I don't know by 2013 were they still doing that way. Yeah. I wonder, was it on a card system at that stage?
You have a card, no, but I'm not sure when that came in.
Yeah. I'm there's no point in us speculating about that. I don't know, but it has been stated that a person known directly to her, essentially living with her, was claiming those benefits, and there's an electronic record of them. Now, it would be more than a year before the Clarke family found out that she had disappeared, and that they were the ones to formally report this to Gardaí in January 2015. Elizabeth did not own a mobile phone. Instead, at times, she would ask to use Kevin Stanley's phone or the parents' mobile phones. In essence, Elizabeth left no real digital footprint. There's absolutely no evidence or proof of life of Elizabeth Clarke after November 2013. That's also another reason why the Gardaí updated it to a murder inquiry, but then one wonders, why did it take them so long? If there was no proof of life between 2013 and 2015, why the hell did it take till 2025 to establish that? I really don't know. I'm not here to answer for the Gardaí. In examining this case, there is an overwhelming theme of dysfunction and dislocation that is incredibly hard to ignore. Had Elizabeth's disappearance been reported within days or weeks, I suspect this case, where and what happened to her, would have been solved very quickly. There's always a profound sadness in a case like this when someone goes missing and their disappearance is not picked up on and reported for such a lengthy period of time. It compounds matters, because those first 72 hours are always the most important. So my heart goes out to the Clarke family and the sustained and persistent efforts they have gone to in keeping a public profile of Elizabeth's case, and that cannot have been eased by the upgrading of the case to murder last week. I'm deeply troubled by the actions and lack of, by the Stanley family. Frankly, their vague account of what happened and the circumstances surrounding Elizabeth's disappearance is both callous and unconvincing. It simply doesn't add up. This was the mother of their grandchildren. The subsequent investigation into neglect and abuse of those vulnerable adds another layer of suspicion and outright duplicity. If Elizabeth's children had to be ultimately removed from the home, we are left wondering what she herself was experiencing in that Claremont household before her disappearance in 2013. And the answers lie there, and any forensic evidence these recent searches can uncover. As long as it took, I do believe Elizabeth Clarke was murdered by persons known to her, and some of the witness statements and accounts presented to Garda Síochána over the years, multiple arrests, are completely fictitious. Brian, maybe before I give my final thoughts, your final thoughts on this case?
Yeah, I think so. Agreed with your last statement there,
yeah.
Mick. Murdered by persons known to her, and a lot went on before that, and all the stuff that's not being said, as opposed to the stuff that is being said.
And there's an awful lot of that isn't being said, and some of it, we're not being difficult. We genuinely can't say, because it will prejudice potential future cases.
It's very, very sad case, and I think the lack of just going, there's not that kind of visceral hurt there to go, we want to know what happened to her, where the hell is she, and it's like there's this sort of that's not there, and I think that's a major red flag in any cases like this, and
there's an awkwardness about this case that I find very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, a very uncomfortable awkwardness about this case.
I think as well, there's her leaving was way in the rear view mirror by the time it was reported. The other thing as well, I think, again, and we've seen this before as well, where the hell were Tusla and so on? They were late in on things as well, I think,
How late have Tusla been on other cases?
I know, exactly. This has been a theme in other things, the
Kyron
Durnan, and where the hell were they? Because and what was being said by neighbours and so on as well. It's all very kind of we saw her then. Oh no, I didn't see her for ages. There's a sort of a vagueness around things there, and this thing, where the hell were Tusla? So I know they can't be on top of everybody, but and I think there was I won't say loopholes, but he was able to claim there. So obviously he was doing something there. He was able to sign, or he was able to do something to keep claiming that money on her behalf as well. So it's the whole thing was just able to play out the way it did. Where other people that have done nothing, or they're micromanaged and monitored to death there about things, and somehow this all just slipped by, and she's still missing 12 years later, nearly 11 years later, or whatever it is. We don't know exactly.
Yeah, and again, this didn't all start post Elizabeth going missing, and again, for matters we can't get into, but regarding the allegations of abuse of an adult and potentially more serious charges, that we can't get into. That didn't start a year ago.
Yeah.
The previous year, or the previous year before that. That was all going on at the time. 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. That was all going on there. And as you say, where was Tusla?
Yeah. The stuff was going on. There was like, who were the guards? You know, when the minute she was reported missing, January 15, they should have all been descended on that. Like, all the authorities, you know, if the Gardaí were in it and they had their suspicions, right? There was 2 kids in the house still there, and they suspected them. Like, then, you know, there should be a series of things that get kicked into place whereby Tusla need to be contacted. There's children in the house, and there's a series of things that you'd expect should have been initiated at that point. Like,
yeah. Again, and like I said, I did, just in case you missed it in the timeline, the Clarke family did instigate proceedings. Yeah. It is not for us to judge how that ended or why it didn't happen the way maybe we would have liked it. It is what it is. I don't know the reasons why. That's just we can't say anymore. That's the family's business. We can't go into any more as a judge made a decision. A family judge made a decision that no, the children should remain there with the father. And by Christ, it's bitten them on the arse now.
Yeah. So I suppose just agreed with the statement in the previous paragraph there, Mick. Just a very, very sad, tragic case, and I think, you know, people could do well to remember Lizzy and all of this. Like, and I just hope to get answers. I mean, there's no hope that she's alive, I think, and I think that, you know, I hope to get answers and to find out what happened to her. For 2 kids as well, I hope they get I hope that they get looked after properly. They'll be teenagers now, and that you know, there's the rest of the Clarke family get answers on what happened to her, and that she's returned for burial and so on. Like, but just wish people would start thinking about her more in all of this as well. Like, certain quarters. But that's it. There's no happy ending here. But
no. There's going to be no happy ending here.
No,
you know.
All you can hope is that they get an answer for her children.
That Elizabeth is ultimately found, and that she is returned and returned back to her family to deal with her remains.
Yeah, and her children are cared for properly and appropriately.
Absolutely, and that this is not going to be easy for them to process, because I'm sure young minds, you know, potentially we've got maybe, I don't know, I'm trying to work it out, a 17-year-old.
There were 2 and 5 in 2013.
14, so 14. You know, you're talking about kids that are secondary school kids now, getting into the later years of secondary school. This is not, this is not going to be easy to process for them, and they're going to be asking an awful lot of questions as well as to what in God's name went on with Mammy and Daddy and grandparents, and, you know, who were those other people, and, you know, where's Mammy? And I'm sure for years they were asking, where's Mammy?
Of course they were.
So look, my final thoughts. In reality, we live in this world in the blink of an eye, and then we're gone. We don't choose the families we are born into, big or small. But this case is perhaps a lesson in us all understanding who our real family are, who will look out for us in times of trouble, who really loves us, and who will come looking for us when we are not around. And the Clarke family have moved heaven and earth over the past 12 years to find Lizzy and find answers as to just what happened to her. Those actions don't come easily. They're born of family, care, love and blood in the veins. Let's hope they get answers.
Yeah.
Brian, I think that's it for this episode.
That's it. Echo that sentiment, Mick. Let's hope to get answers and to find Lizzy and her children. As I said already, her children get the care that they need and deserve there.
Okay, we wish them. God bless everybody. As always, this is very much a developing case. We will keep it updated if should there be any developments through the channel. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully we'll see you soon in another timeline.
All the best, folks. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for you, Brian, for joining us. God bless. Take care.